As she returned home that evening, her stepmother called her all sorts of degrading names, saying that her evil hair was the root cause of all the terrible things that had been happening. She called her dreadlocks evil snakes hanging on her head, saying that if she fails to cut her hair, evil will continue to be unleashed. Once upon a time, in the heart of a very small village, lived a girl named Tare. Tare was unlike any other girl in the village. Her dreadlocks stood her apart from her peers, who made fun of her because of her hair. They would tug at her hair while she walked on the streets, and some even went as far as believing that she was possessed. Tare's mother spared no opportunity to tell her how special she was, but this was so hard for her to believe, as every other person in the village detested her because of her hair. One day, Tare was fetching some water from the village stream when a boy named Ebitimi arrived the stream with his friends. Ebitimi was the son of a very wealthy man in the village who was well known and respected. He approached Tare and requested that she gives him some water from her clay pot. His friends laughed as they waited to see Tare's reaction. Without saying any word, Tare dipped a small calabash into her clay pot and offered it to Ebitimi, who was shocked at her calm demeanor. As Ebitimi drank from the calabash, he found himself staring at Tare's dreadlocks, and his friends wondered what had come over him. He handed the calabash back to her as he thanked her for being so kind. All his friends opened their mouths in shock, as this was so unusual of Ebitimi, who was always arrogant and rude. They laughed at him as they teased him for drinking from a cursed girl's water pot, but Ebitimi paid no mind to them, as he could not shake off the feeling that there was more to her than meets the eye. As the days passed, Tare's encounter with Ebitimi became the subject of gossip in the village, especially as Ebitimi became terribly ill. Many believed that Ebitimi had been bewitched by the girl with the strange hair, whilst others speculated that the curse which followed Tare had transferred into Ebitimi, making him sick. His rich father did everything within his power to restore his son's health, but as the days went by, Ebitimi's sickness grew worse. Tare felt so terrible, as everyone believed that she was the cause of his sickness. Their accusing eyes pierced through her skin as she walked the streets of the village, and Tare in that moment knew that she had to do something about all that was happening. As she returned home that evening, her stepmother called her all sorts of degrading names, saying that her evil hair was the root cause of all the terrible things that had been happening. She called her dreadlocks evil snakes hanging on her head, saying that if she fails to cut her hair, evil will continue to be unleashed. Tare felt so terrible to hear this, as she returned into her hut and began to cry. She took a sharp blade and was about cutting her hair when her mother entered into her hut and stopped her. Tare wept uncontrollably as she asked her mother if she was cursed, and her mother told her that her hair was a blessing and that she should not listen to all that the people were saying because she was perfect with her dreadlocks. Night came and Tare could not sleep. She was so worried about the rich man's son Ebitimi, as she wondered if she had a hand in his sickness. Tare began to whistle her favorite song, hoping to fall asleep, when she heard a strange sound outside her door. It was late in the night, and Tare was extremely afraid. She decided to check what it was and was confronted by the sight of a frail old woman sitting under the tree close to her hut. "You called for me," the old woman said, as goosebumps filled Tare's entire body. "What worries you, precious one?" the old woman asked, and Tare, stammering out of fear, told the old woman all that had been happening. The old woman listened intently as she spoke. She told Tare that people fear what they cannot understand and that her dreadlocks was not a curse but a gift to the entire village. Tare looked at the old woman in confusion as she asked what she meant by a gift, but before she could finish asking the question, the old woman disappeared into the night. Tare returned to her hut, unable to sleep, as she thought about all the old woman had said. She woke up the next morning to a loud noise in front of her hut and realized that a group of villagers had come to take her away. They all believed that Tare was cursed and had to be banished out of their village. Tare's mother did all she could to stop them from taking her daughter away, but all her efforts proved futile, so she decided to leave the village with her daughter. Tare and her mother had nowhere to go, so they wandered from one village to the other. The people had never seen one with such a hair before, and this terrified them as they wondered if Tare's hair were snakes. No one let them settle in their village, so for days, Tare and her mother slept in the dark forest as the mosquitoes feasted on their delicate bodies. However, despite the fear and rejection that they faced, Tare's mother never for once faltered in her belief that her daughter's hair was a blessing. She reminded Tare of her ancestry, of warriors and healers who had carried the same dreadlocks through the ages. Your hair is a symbol of strength, her mother said, and one day it will show its true power to all. Tare clung onto her mother's words but couldn't take her mind off the possibility that the villagers might have been right. So Tare, whilst her mother slept one night, snuck out of the forest away from her sleeping mother. It was not an easy decision for Tare, who could not stand the sight of her mother suffering for her sake. She hoped that her absence would force her mother to return back to their village, back to her comfort, as she could not stand by and watch her suffer. Tare wandered from one village to the other, hoping to find someone who would accept her for who she was. She faced so many rejections on the way, as people called her a witch and a sorceress, but Tare did not give up as she kept on going. One night, as Tare lay to sleep in the forest, she saw a strange figure in the distance. It was the figure of a man who moved extremely fast. Tare was terrified as she wondered how a man could move so fast. Filled with terror, Tare tried to run away when the strange-looking man grabbed her by her hair, and Tare noticed a bright glow that emanated from her dreadlocks. Tare watched as the strange-looking man transformed into a very handsome man. She was so amazed as she could not believe what had just happened. The young man thanked Tare for saving him and asked what she was doing alone in the forest. Tare explained all she had passed through in the hands of her people who believed that she was cursed because of her hair. The young man urged Tare to follow him as he could not watch her live in the forest. They walked into the village and Tare was met with curious stares, not of fear but of wonder. The young man, who introduced himself as Tonye, was the prince of the village. He explained that an evil witch had cast a spell on him, turning him into a strange being, doomed to roam the forest, and only the touch of one with a pure and misunderstood heart could break the curse. Tare, with her unique dreadlocks, was the one destined to break his curse. Tonye then led her to his father the king, who was a wise and kind man. He listened to Tare's story, his heart moved by the injustice she had endured. Your hair is a gift, young Tare, and it has broken a curse that the most powerful healers could not. We welcome you as our own. Tare, for once in her life, felt accepted by a people who appreciated the power of her locks. Her mother, who never stopped looking for her, learnt of her whereabouts and arrived at the palace to see her daughter. Tare was so happy to see her mother, who hugged her tightly. Meanwhile, back in Tare's birth village, Ebitimi's illness worsened and the village healer received a revelation that Tare was the only one with the power to heal his sickness. The healer informed Ebitimi's father of the revelation and he set out in search of Tare. After a few days, they arrived Tonye's kingdom and were shocked to find Tare, who lived in the palace of the king. The rich man pleaded with Tare to save his son's life, and Tare, filled with compassion, agreed to heal his son Ebitimi. When they arrived their village, Tare went straight to Ebitimi's side. She let down her dreadlocks and placed it on Ebitimi's chest. Immediately, the locks glowed and the illness vanished as Ebitimi regained his health. The entire village rejoiced as the people called out Tare's name in joy. But just as Tare was about leaving Ebitimi's home, she was told that her stepmother was dying and needed to see her. Tare, confused as to what was happening, arrived at her stepmother's hut and realized that her stepmother was the one behind Ebitimi's sickness. She heard of Ebitimi's encounter with Tare by the riverside and decided to make him extremely sick so that the entire village would point accusing fingers at Tare. Little did she know that her evil plan would lead to her own demise. She revealed that since her husband, who was Tare's father, died, she was envious of the bond that Tare and her mother shared and decided to break it. The only way to achieve this was to make people believe that Tare was a witch and the one behind Ebitimi's illness. Her stepmother pleaded for forgiveness and Tare wasted no time to forgive her. Tare tried to use her hair to save her stepmother's life but noticed that her hair failed to glow. It was then that she heard a silent voice in her heart that her stepmother's heart was still filled with so much evil for her and that until she purges herself from such evil, she will die. Tare pleaded with her stepmother to let go of the evil, but she refused and died in her wickedness. The entire village was shaken at the revelation as they apologized to Tare for how badly they treated her. As the days went by, Prince Tonye found himself visiting Tare's village more often. With each visit, the bond between them blossomed like a tree in full bloom. One evening, as Tare and the prince decided to take a stroll to the village stream, the prince spoke to her saying that since the day she walked into his life, she healed not only his curse but his heart. The prince told Tare that he couldn't think of anyone else to walk beside him as he leads his people and asked if she would do him the honors of being his bride. Tare, filled with excitement, agreed to marry the prince as she loved him so dearly. That was how Tare, the girl born with dreadlocks, became a queen after suffering years of rejection and discrimination. The lesson to be learned from this story is that evil has an expiry date. Do not dig a pit for others, as you might just fall into the pit to your own destruction. Do not discriminate others because they look different from you. Learn to be open-minded and accept others regardless of their unique attributes. Always be kind because a little act of kindness might just save a life. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.